First item of business is to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion. Second. Any questions, revisions, comments? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? I'm not going to give a statement today because we have a very full agenda, and in trying to keep this thing moving quickly, I'm going to outline what we're going to do. We're going to need to make some modifications in the agenda. First, we will take public comments before the completion of the agenda. Okay, we were going to hold and do the public comments afterwards. Looking at the number of public comments, we can do that if we hold the timeline to 3 minutes per comment. So we will pretty strictly enforce a 3-minute timeline. Part of that is because knowing most of the comments are about REPA 2, and that we have already had a period of public comment on REPA 2, that we shouldn't need a full 5 minutes per public comment. So we will hold the public comments to 3 minutes per person. After that, we will then move directly into the action items. And if you have an agenda in front of you, I want to just quickly note something. So again, we will move the action item directly behind, directly after we'll move after the public comments. If you'll notice on F under action, it's adjudication to determine tuition support to be withheld from Indianapolis Public Schools and Gary Community School Corporation for the operation of the turnaround academies. As I had to in the past, I will step out and recuse myself during that piece of the agenda. While it will be very brief because it's my understanding, I think we have agreement among the parties. So unlike the last time we had this where we didn't have an agreement, we do have agreement among all the parties, but still, given the fact of the state superintendent as a party to the contract, it's only appropriate that I do not take part in any discussion or portion of that item on the agenda. After the action item, we'll move to the consent agenda. So with that, I am going to take the privilege very quickly of introducing and allowing her to come to the podium. Glenda Ritz, who will be taking over the leadership of the state board and as superintendent of public instruction effective January 14th, did ask to make a comment. And so I'm going to just take the prerogative as the chairman of the board to allow that at this time, recognize her, and welcome her when she starts here on the 14th. We will have one more meeting on January 2nd prior to Ms. Ritz taking over as superintendent and chairman of the board, and we'll talk about that later. So Glenda, please feel free to come forward and welcome.
Thank you. And is this working?
It's only for the live stream. It doesn't.
Okay, good. Just making sure. Thank you for that opportunity, Dr. Bennett. I appreciate that. I am Glenda Ritz, Superintendent-elect of Public Instruction, and I think I've had some initial contact with members of the board, and I look forward to meeting with you and talking about education policy. Earlier this week, I did, as part of my transition with only 27 business days until I take office, I did respectfully request of Dr. Bennett that the action items coming before the State Board of Education be tabled so that I might have an opportunity to meet with each one of you, look over the action items, review fiscal cost of any of the items that we might have before us, to gather any appropriate input before going forward. I was denied that request, and so I'm here before you respectfully requesting that you might table the items, particularly REPA 2, which has long-reaching impact, and I am not aware of the fiscal impact of that action that we might take, so that we could have a dialogue at a later time. So with that, I want to say that pre-service training and licensing for our educators is very important, and we cannot afford to have anything in the way of putting unqualified teachers in our classroom. I am a national board certified teacher, and so I have a vision for what pre-service should be all about for our teachers in Indiana, for our profession, and I look forward to working with you on that, regardless of what happens today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenda.
Tony, I would like to make a statement.
Sure.
Is this the right time to do so?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I know we want to move quickly, so I'll keep this very short. Earlier this year, I had the privilege and the pleasure of being asked by Governor Daniels to work with him on a book that was a compilation of the speeches that he's given as governor. And he included in the book, at the end, what we called the speech he didn't have to give. And it was something that he had prepared in the event that he had been defeated in 2008 when he ran for re-election. I think it's appropriate for this occasion, so I'd like to read it. It's very short. And the governor, as usual, says things more articulately and eloquently than I could ever hope to do. So, some people measure success in public life by elections won, by the pure mathematics of 50 plus 1 or 50 minus 1. I don't. I see success in public life based on commitments kept, actions taken, results produced, integrity preserved. By that standard, Tony, yours has been a highly successful project in public service. Better 4 years of action and accomplishments than 8 or more years sitting timidly on your hands. Better to lose an election because you dared and did than to win one because we talked a good game while doing nothing of consequence. No one had to tell you the risks of making big changes in a state not known for change. You told our fellow citizens openly and honestly what we believed, what you believed, and what you intended to do. You matched your actions to your words, did what you said you would, and let the chips fall. So a few too many fell the other way. That's the chance you took. Gladly so, and I commend you for it.
Very good.
Dr. Ritt's
Sure,
comments.
absolutely.
I just want to say, this isn't something we've just started. We've been working on this for 2 or 3 years. And while there was a $1.3 million votes, there are 4 million who did not vote, who are registered. And there are many, many, many children we're representing. So it is our responsibility to act every time we have the opportunity. Every minute we waste is hurting a child. And that's just how I feel.
Thank you, Joe. Let's go ahead with public comment, please, Beck.
Shelley?
Good morning. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you today regarding REPA 2. I represent the teaching profession today wearing 2 hats. First, my role as Dean of the College of Education at Butler University and also as President of the Indiana Association for the Colleges of Teacher Education. The dialogue that occurred this summer about REPA 2 was a really good beginning, and ICTE and I personally appreciate that opportunity that we were given to dialogue. And we tried to clarify opportunities and challenges in teacher preparation and licensure. And some of the changes made do reflect public testimony, and yet there are some items that still need further consideration. The first item is the concern about 3 content areas that would be new test-only additions to licenses: English as a new language, fine arts, and high ability. I hold a K-6 life license, and I could probably pass 1 or more of those tests, but I would not consider myself qualified to go into a classroom and teach in any of those areas. The second concern is the standard set for administrator licenses, particularly the building level administrator. With the increased expectations and accountability of this position, why would we lower the standards for preparation? And the last item I bring forward to you today is the lack of detail in REPA 2 pertaining to the review and approval of teacher education programs. IACTE is most willing and eager to work with the department and the board to develop a criteria and a process and timeline for implementation of program review and approval. Teacher education has been diligent in implementing their work regarding REPA 1. We need to collect data now on REPA 1 to measure its effectiveness. I respectfully ask the board to wait until we can work through these final details concerning REPA 2 so that we can move forward together with a decision that will truly impact the quality in the classroom. Thank you for your consideration of my comments.
Good morning. My name is Derek Redelman with the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. The Indiana Chamber of Commerce was pleased to support the original passage of REPA 1, and to the extent that new action is required due to the shift in responsibility to the State Board of Education, we support and encourage your action to do so. Moreover, we strongly support the additional advancements contained in REPA 2. We encourage your adoption of those rules today, but we would also suggest to you that your work in this arena is far from done and that additional bolder changes ought to be considered in the very near future. Specific to some of the concerns that we have heard regarding the changes in REPA 2. First, we applaud the continuing and additional emphasis that you are giving to content knowledge. We agree that subject area expertise alone is not sufficient to be a good teacher. That is as obvious to us as it is to those who oppose alternative pathways into teaching. But whether you are entering the teaching profession through traditional pathways or alternative pathways, content knowledge is absolutely essential. No matter how good your pedagogical skills, it is simply not possible to be an effective teacher if you do not know the subject you are teaching. Our current system does not do enough to address that fact, and REPA represents a positive step to correcting that important oversight. Second, the flexibility on administrator licensing is another welcome improvement. I have sought and have yet to find any other profession in our society that requires a specific degree to hold a CEO position. University presidents need not be professors, hospital CEOs need not be MDs, manufacturing CEOs need not be engineers. In some cases, the best person to fill such roles has those credentials, but often that is not the case. Indeed, it is simply bad practice to require a chief executive to have formal credentials in only one aspect of their multifaceted job. That brings me to my third point. Contrary to a lot of what I have seen written or suggested in recent weeks, excuse me, nothing that you have proposed in REPA 1 or REPA 2 will guarantee anybody's qualifications for a job. All that you are doing, other than raising the bar on content knowledge, is providing greater flexibility at the local level and allowing the potential pool of candidates to be expanded. Any candidate for a job must still go through a hiring process where I certainly hope the professionals making those hiring decisions will consider all the qualifications of the candidate. So again, the Indiana Chamber supports REPA 1 and encourages your movement on REPA 2. We also support the proposed, or we urge you to complete those steps today with your vote. We urge you to continue working on additional changes that emphasize increasing content knowledge for our teachers, alternative pathways for entering teaching, strong evaluation components that focus on student learning, and flexibility in administrative hiring to reflect the broad scopes of their respective jobs. Thank you.
Brent Kent.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Brent Kent, and I'm the Indiana State Director for Students First. I want to start by saying Students First supports the improvements of REPA 2 because they allow more qualified and talented individuals to enter the teaching profession. We know the impact of great teachers on students. They are the single most important in-school factor affecting student growth. And at a time when Indiana is facing a shortage of teachers, it's important that we seek to remove unnecessary barriers that hinder qualified teaching candidates from entering the profession. REPA 2 tells Indiana's future educators that what matters most in the classroom is their impact on student achievement. Provisions such as requiring that renewal of adjunct permits be predicated on a teacher's effectiveness shifts the emphasis of our K-12 public education system to what's best for students. Furthermore, we applaud the move REPA 1 made towards using content exams to certify a second area of teaching expertise. Teachers already licensed and possessing rigorous knowledge of multiple content areas should be able to teach students they are passionate about or where their subject where their school has a need, without having to take burdensome coursework. Additionally, routes to licensing for specialized areas separated by developmental needs and REPA 2 should be evaluated carefully to prevent burdensome requirements. While we commend the board on today's vote, there are a couple areas that we urge the board to consider in the future. One of the main things we'd like to emphasize, undergraduate degrees related to teaching area or in the area of education are not shown to be correlated with classroom effectiveness. We should minimize obstacles for all quality candidates while holding them accountable to rigorous certification exams and highly selective admissions standards. REPA 2 builds on the progress already made in the area of teacher certification in Indiana. In the end, it shouldn't matter how a teacher gets to the classroom. What should matter is that he or she has a positive impact on student learning. Thank you all, board members and Dr. Bennett, for your courage and your leadership in moving Indiana forward and putting our students first.
P.J. McGrew.
First and foremost, I would like to thank the board and you, Mr. Superintendent, for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. As you will hear from my testimony, an alternative pathway to teaching is something that I'm extremely passionate about, as I went through it myself. My name is Patrick McGrew. I'm a public school teacher and a Students First member. I am currently teaching at Heron High School, a charter school located here in downtown Indianapolis. This is my second year at Heron and my 6th year teaching overall, and I got into education through an alternative licensing program. I began my teaching career in Idaho, and I received my initial teaching certificate through an alternative licensing program, and because of my years of service there, I was able to transfer my license to Indiana. My road to education began when I started substitute teaching my senior year of college, just to make some extra money, so I thought. I was a double math major and philosophy major and had other career aspirations until I began substitute teaching. I quickly realized that teaching was something that I was very passionate about, and I could be very good at it. I only substitute taught for math classes, and teachers that I subbed for were quick to contact me whenever they were going to be gone. And I found that this was a career that I could enjoy and succeed at, but I wasn't sure if it was feasible to change my major so late in my college career. My wife and I had decided that upon graduation we were going to move closer to her family, which was in Idaho at the time. And so I quickly began looking at alternative licensing programs. I could not afford to spend the money on a transitioning to teaching program, but found a program that would license me in the state of Idaho and 10 other states by simply passing a series of 2 tests. The first test was a content-based exam that covered all types of mathematics ranging from elementary level all the way through calculus. The second test was a classroom best practice exam. And after passing both exams, I began teaching in Idaho until we decided, once we started a family, to move back here to Indiana. And because I had had my license long enough in Idaho, I was able to transfer that here. Throughout my 6 years in education, I have worked in public, alternative, and now a charter school. Every school I have taught at has served a high number of low-income and at-risk students. And receiving my teaching certificate from an alternative licensing program has not diminished the impact that I have had in the classroom and in the schools that I have served. I have been nominated for Teacher of the Year. I have had a 93% passer rate on statewide end-of-course assessments, participated in writing statewide end-of-course assessments, chaired a district-wide curriculum search committee, mentored colleagues, and helped a failing school meet adequate yearly progress after 5 years of being labeled as failing. And most importantly, I have contributed to a countless number of students finding success at both the high school and college level. Without an alternative licensing program, the impact that I have had on my students and the schools that I have served would never have been felt. Because of people like myself who do not find their passion for education until later in life, and because of the success that we have had without the so-called normal background in education, I am in full support of Indiana finding an easier alternative pathway to teaching. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I thank you for your service and this opportunity to present my story today.
Jill Shedd.
Good morning. It's nice to see all of you this morning. I come to you wearing 2 hats, one as a member of the Board of School Trustees of Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation in Columbus, and also as Executive Secretary of the Indiana Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. First, I really want to extend my appreciation for the changes that are made in the proposed rules before you today. Those revisions reflect comments that were made during the public hearing, as well as meetings that the Department of Education was willing to have with representatives of various professional education associations. I thank the department for listening and for being open to the changes to the original proposals. I believe that the revisions in these following elements that are before you today were very positive. The removal of 4 content areas that could be added by a license only. Could be added to a license only by passing a test. The changes that were made to awarding and the renewal of teacher licenses. The inclusion of the option to license the area of exceptional needs at the secondary level, and also the retention of existing requirements surrounding the emergency permit. Thank you very much. I extend that to the department for those changes. But this morning I wish to offer comments about 2 elements of the proposed rules that are before you today for further consideration. First is the 3 content areas that remain available for adding to an existing license by only passing the content test. Our students for whom English is a new language for the most part represent an at-risk population, and thus they need the very best, highly qualified teachers to facilitate their language and academic learning. I believe that merely passing a test in ENL does not represent the quality of teacher that this student population needs. These students need a teacher who's been prepared in the various teaching strategies focused on their English and their content learning and has participated in a supervised, structured classroom experience with these students prior to assuming responsibility for their learning. I strongly encourage you to reconsider the proposal of licensing ENL teachers without any professional preparation in an approved program. The same is true of our high ability students. They are a very special population and they need the very best, highly qualified teachers to nurture and to challenge them. And lastly, I am distressed by the message that I hear in the proposal that fine arts might be added to a license simply by passing the respective content test. The message that I hear is that the fine arts are not integral to our school curricula. The message that I hear is that our students do not deserve teachers prepared in arts, in music, prepared to nurture students' artistic abilities, prepared to offer students quality performance opportunities in band and choir. Research consistently has highlighted the positive correlation between students' experience in music and skills in STEM-related disciplines, as well as the positive correlation between their music experience and their academic performance in high school and higher education. Given the importance of the fine arts in our school's curricula and our students' experience, why would we permit them to have less qualified teachers in music and the fine arts? The second topic I wish to cover briefly is that of the creation of an adjunct permit. The need for this permit has yet to be provided. The concept of an adjunct permit requiring only a certain undergraduate GPA and a degree in a field along with passage of a content test, not even the pedagogy test under development to be required of all education degree graduates, lowers the standards for teachers at a time when the demands of student reading readiness, student learning growth, and student college and career readiness are at an all-time high. The requirements do not include any preparation associated with reading and literacy instruction, child development, classroom management, or instructional strategies. So along with the existing teacher preparation programs we have, I believe the Department of Education already provides an array of certification options, and I would ask that we, the board and the Department of Education, work together with the teacher education programs that we could put together a program to identify the void that seems to be implied by the need of creating an adjunct permit. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you, and thank you again to the department for its openness to public comments and suggestions, and for the positive revisions that are reflected in the proposed rules before you today.
Again, I want to emphasize that we really need to stay at 3 minutes.
I will. Got the.
Go ahead.
Pat Rogan?
Does it beep? Or?
No, I just have to watch the little red.
Good morning. I have worked in education for 34 years and currently serve as the Executive Associate Dean of the School of Education at IUPUI. At a time when K-12 educators are being asked to do more with less and achieve better outcomes for more students, the proposal at hand is lowering the standards for teacher and administrator preparation. Although the current version of REPA 2 reflects some of the changes recommended during the public hearing, there are many components of the proposal that are problematic and represent a step backward. I want to echo some of the comments that have already been made by summarizing the primary issues. I am strongly against the adjunct permit, sending unprepared individuals into classrooms to learn to teach on the backs of, in many cases, our neediest children is inappropriate. This represents the antithesis of highly prepared teachers. The provision must be removed. Administrator licenses. Building administrators, as you've heard, as you know, are required to have a broad skill set in order to be effective. Increased expectations and pressures for ever higher performance require stronger, not less preparation and experience. There is no justification for lowering the standards for administrator licensure. Furthermore, teaching experience in higher education does not equate to K-12 classroom experience. No content area should be allowed to obtain a license by merely taking a test. With the increasing need for highly qualified teachers of students learning English, we cannot afford to send individuals with absolutely no preparation into schools. All content areas should require rigorous, competency-based, field-based programs of study. P-12 licensure for exceptional needs is problematic. I'm a special educator. As such, I can attest to the fact that it is highly unlikely that one program of study could sufficiently prepare special educators with in-depth subject area content, pedagogical knowledge, and clinical practice at preschool through high school levels. I recommend licensing at either the elementary or secondary levels. We have no evidence of the effectiveness of REPA 1 changes, so additional licensure changes should not be made at this time. The current document weakens educator preparation. The only appropriate action is to table the proposal. Thank you very much.
Gerardo Gonzalez.
Good morning. My name is Gerardo Gonzalez. I'm Dean of the IU School of Education. Although I am not speaking for the university, as Dean of a major school of education, I'm concerned that REPA 2 will lower standards for educator preparation at a time when schools of education are being called upon to be more selective, strengthen teacher preparation, and enhance teaching experiences, clinical experiences for educators. In the long term, REPA 2 will diminish the teaching profession and make it more difficult to recruit the best and brightest into teaching. I do appreciate that you have listened to the comments made by the citizens of Indiana during the REPA 2 public comment period and are proposing ways to incorporate some of them into the revised rules. Removing exceptional needs, communication disorders, elementary and early childhood from the license by examination only provisions of REPA 2 is an important step. But why not extend these exceptions to English as a new language, fine arts, and high ability licenses currently under REPA? As an E&L student myself, when I came to this country, I can tell you from personal experience that not every teacher who can teach math or English or history or any other subject can be effective in teaching these subjects to limited English proficiency students. This is not an area in which a teacher can take a standardized test and be qualified to teach. I would urge you to keep all the exceptions currently in REPA 2. I would also urge you to keep the current requirements that the building level and district level administrators have a master's and a specialist education degree respectively. Principals today are expected to engage in database management, conduct more and better teacher evaluations, turn around low-performing schools, and much more. Lowering the academic standards for building level administration does not make sense. One REPA 2 provision I urge you to remove, however, is the adjunct teaching permit. That provision is not needed. Moreover, linking the adjunct teacher permit to teacher evaluations when that linkage has been removed from every other section of REPA 2 is inconsistent and counterproductive. These evaluation systems were never intended to be used as instruments of teacher licensure. I can certainly see why some minor adjustments to the REPA rules may be necessary. But why not wait until REPA is fully implemented and evaluated before adding additional new rules that have no track record or basis in research? The proposed REPA 2 rules are not just tweaks. They include several major new proposals, as well as the reintroduction of many of the rules proposed in the original REPA and taken out because of public comment. While I applaud your efforts to incorporate suggestions made during the REPA 2 public comment period, much more work needs to be done. I urge you to table REPA 2 until these changes can be studied and we can put together a thoughtful, collaborative process to achieve the desired goals. Sure as that, I hope you will seriously consider the points I have made above and that have been supported by extensive public testimony. Our faculty and I stand ready to work in partnership with the Department of Education, the State Board, and all education stakeholders to ensure that we put in place a standards of educator preparation and licensure that can truly serve as a model for the country. Thank you.
I think we need a system so that I can let them know when they have 1 minute rather than interrupting. So I don't know whether just to hand them the 1 minute warning.
We need to stick to the 3 minutes.
Because I hate to interrupt when they're, so I will hand you, when you have 1 minute left, I will slide this up on the podium.
About 15.
5, 10, 17, 18, 19.
Okay.
I don't want to cut anybody off, but if somebody's going to say exactly the same thing that somebody said before, maybe that'd be a way of shortening.
Been on the record, so it would be helpful if people saying the same, making the same argument. We've heard the argument now. Very well articulated.
Next up, Brad, is it Oliver? Okay.
My name is Brad Oliver. I'm the Associate Dean of Education at Indiana Wesleyan University and the unit head. I was also privileged to serve on the Indiana Professional Standards Advisory Board up until it dissolved last year. So I wanted to, first of all, thank Mike Pettibone, who attended the one and only hearing on REPA 2, and as well as the board, because I understand what it is to go through all the comments, and I understand you had an overwhelming amount of comments. I just wanted to clarify that there is nothing in REPA 2 that further strengthens the content knowledge expectations associated by REPA 1. In fact, the standards and their associated competency exams were already set in motion with the passage of REPA 1 and subsequent actions taken by the Indiana Professional Standards Advisory Board prior to the Standards Board being dissolved last year. REPA 2 does set in motion an unnecessary lessening of the requirements of the principal preparation program in the name of flexibility, and here's my comment to that. Flexibility is best handled through the current waiver process managed by the IDOE that allows school boards to basically petition to the department to seek a waiver, such as what we've done with the superintendents, not by lessening the general requirements. And finally, REPA 2 introduces the possibility of private entities competing with the university and colleges for teacher preparation. And while that may sound appealing, the language of REPA 2 fails to stipulate unequivocally by what standards such groups would be approved by the DOE, all the while universities and colleges continue to spend thousands of dollars going through a stringent accreditation process. The bottom line is there's nothing today in the current landscape of teacher preparation that requires action on REPA 2 at this time. So I would please ask that you consider tabling action on REPA 2 until there's more time to study the current rule. There have been a number of changes made since the one hearing held this summer, and I think it would allow an opportunity for professionals to take a second look at it before you take action on it. Thank you.
Mary, and I'm sorry I can't pronounce your last name. Yearling. All right, thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Mary Yearling. I'm a parent of 3 children. I'm a member of Parent Power and Education Community Action Team, also known as ECAT, here in Indianapolis. I'm speaking today first and foremost because my children and all public school children in Indiana are worth it. They are worth me as a single mother of 3 to take and spend a vacation day for me to come and talk to you. And I wanted to personally speak because what you do or what you don't do today and in the future will greatly affect the direct stakeholders of Indiana's public education schools. Those are the students, the parents, the teachers, school administrators, and communities in Indiana. Because life is too short and time is the hottest commodity. I will be to the point and want to make my message real clear. I strongly feel your vote concerning REPA 2 needs to be sang by the #1 selling duo in music history, Daryl Hall and John Oates. I can't go for that. No can do. I just can't fathom how you could have missed the point of the 1.3 majority of Indiana voters voting for Glenda Ritz and her campaign agenda to be what the public doesn't want. I got the news, and I haven't watched television for over 2 years. One can't logically argue that 1.3 million votes does not send a clear message that the majority of Indiana voters are fed up with the purposeful dismantling of Indiana's public education system, degrading of teacher profession, and handing over taxpayers' money that was meant for Indiana public school children over to for-profit capitalists. The introduction of shift the authority of approving programs from IDOE to SBOE, end quote, the last Friday is unacceptable and is an affront to the 1.3 majority of Indiana voters. I am my child's first teacher. I have special needs, I have general education, and I have a gifted child. I'm also a human resource professional who understands the commitment it takes to sit for a professional exam and the commitment it takes to be a professional. I have volunteered many hours in public school for almost 12 years, and in those 12 years, I've come to understand and know an effective teacher is one where teaching is their passion and their profession. Teaching K-12 children takes pedagogy, the principles, the practice, and the profession of teaching that can only be learned with higher education. I am a parent, and I've come to speak, and you've given 5 minutes to other things, so I'm going to finish my last paragraph. Last and most importantly, I come today as a human being. Human beings are very capable of making mistakes. There's not one of us in this room or in the overflow room, including myself, which is without at least one mistake in their life. The bright side of potential mistakes is that we all have free will, a point where we, as individual human beings, must make a choice. Sometimes that choice is choosing between the lesser of two evils. Sometimes that choice is clearly between right and wrong. As a fellow human being on this earth and as your constituent, a part of the public of Indiana, I beseech you to make your voting on this board out of your free will and conscience, and not from political or special interest lobbying or influences. I implore you to listen and act with and for, let me finish, I'm almost finished, with the public you serve. I ask that you
I'm
serve
tuned out.
the public you serve. If not, know your conscience. Now is the time for you to make a choice. Or table it. Your choice.
So we will, again, we're going to start really having a hard cutoff at 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Neil Wren.
One issue is we don't need to be philosophically counseled. We've heard it.
I understand.
Thank you.
I'm not here for rip. I have a son. He's my second son. We've spent 17 years in New Albany-Floyd County School District, finishing our New Albany-Floyd County. We have 2 high schools in the county. Now, I was going to read this because I had a counselor say, that's your son. So here's my son. 4 years marching band, state finals. 3 years winter percussion. He's a drum instructor. He's a drum captain this year. He's an a cappella choir section leader. He sings in chamber singers. He made National Honor Society. He sings with the Family Gospel Singers. He's a tutor, a mentor. He took 4 AP classes as a junior, 3 AP classes as a senior, about a half a dozen honors classes going in, got a 198 PSAT, a 29 ACT, a 1400 SAT math and verbal, and he has a 3.56 grade point average. He does not qualify for $9,000 a year at IU, guaranteed automatic money, because our school didn't weight the grades. The other high school in the county did. New Albany High School has a weighting average. He would be a 4.08 and a shoe-in for money. I've asked our board to fix this. They've said no. They said you weren't here 3 years ago. You weren't here 5 years ago. 10 years ago, this came up. And they've done nothing. They listen to no one. They report to nobody but you folks. And I'm asking you people to put some pressure on these guys to hear the 200 parents. We have 200 parents that would benefit from this. And I've got about 30 of them lined up for a meeting in 2 weeks. But this has gone on for 23 years, and it happens other places in the state as well. We're one of maybe 10% of the country that didn't wait, and because of that, our kids go begging for money for college at a time whenever we don't have money. So I think if you can help with that, I'd appreciate it, and I'll leave all the rest of my stuff.
Well,
Yes,
I do, I'd be somewhat remiss if I didn't say I have a little bit of knowledge of the situation. So if I just, for the clarity of the board, you have 2 high schools in your district.
Yes, sir.
High School A has one set of, if you will, standards for grading scales.
Right. Similar
High
to
school,
Carmel, St. X, Trinity, all those premier high schools.
High School B has another set.
That is just a standard straight. If you get an A in an AP class, you get 4 points for it.
And so your primary concern is that you believe your district has set up a system where students are treated in a disparate way based on equal attainment.
Yes, sir. That's
I needed to clarify that.
Yeah, and if you really look at the attainment numbers, my high school, Floyd Central High School, has double the participation rate in New Albany High School in the AP tests. They have nearly double the pass rate in the AP tests, and they're ranked in the top 10 in the state. We rank right just below Carmel on the pass rate, and we get no bonus for that compared to the hard work and everything else that New Albany kids do get the bonus, and they don't have the academic performance. So
That's clarifies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything we can do? I'm going to check. Mr. Wren, if you would leave your contact information before you leave today, and we will follow up. Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Mark Bartlow.
First of all, thank you for having us speak. I have a cold. I think it's from grading so many papers this week. I'm Mark Bartlow. I'm a biology anatomy teacher and medical science teacher at Bloomfield High School. I've been a teacher since 2005 and came from the Transition to Teach program. At Bloomfield High School, we're a little unique. We're in the RISE pilot program, and so we've been through this system before. Also at Bloomfield, 1 out of every 7 teachers is Transition to Teach teacher. I was in business for many years prior to becoming a teacher, owned a seed company. My wife and I owned a pharmacy. We sold those companies and sought out other opportunities to pursue our goals. I always wanted to be a high school science teacher, so Transition to Teach was perfect for me. I'm grateful for the decisions the board has made regarding implementing PL 90 and REPA 2. RISE worked well for Bloomfield as a pilot last year and is much smoother the second year. We know what is expected now. As a member of the Indiana Education Reform Cabinet, I've spoken with several schools about RISE. The greatest angst among the first-year RISE teachers that they don't want to be evaluated based on a test, and some don't think their principal or administrator will evaluate them fairly. Perhaps a bottom-up review system would ease the minds of those teachers. Accountability is normal in the business world. Why should it be different for teachers? It seems we are very good at handing out grades, but when it comes to get a grade ourselves, we're very poor. The profession has not caught up with business yet. It's good we have methods for measuring a teacher's success and growth. Perhaps we could in the future use PARCC for grades 3 through 8. With collaboration with College Board, the ACT, SAT, use that for high school testing. Core 40 tests for biology, ISTEP, are very time consuming and don't accurately portray the goals laid out in the beginning of the course by ISTEP. By using the SAT or ACT for college placement as well as data point on RISE, not ISTEP or Core 40, the shift of focus would ease the minds of the other concerned teachers. Concerning REPA 2, While I understand those who don't want to extend flexibility in licensing rules, I and thousands of others have been given the opportunity to become a teacher in a field with which we were trained. I believe a teacher should receive high content knowledge first, then become a certified teacher. That way a teacher is passionate about their field of expertise and also passionate about teaching. Many teachers, especially in the secondary level, need to ensure that they are the content experts for their school, not just a license that understands how to teach. Thank you for your service, Board of Education. We are not teachers nor board members for the money or for the recognition, even though that helps. But we are here to help nurture children of the next generation of Americans. You have paved the way for accountability in education. The students are already showing improvement across the board. Thank you for embracing flexibility in hiring to include experts from the field. I appreciate the job you have done. Look forward to Indiana leading the way in education. Thank you very much.
Right on 3 minutes.
3 minutes. Benchmark, there it is.
Shirley Wright. In the overflow.
I saw Shirley earlier. You want to go to the next one while she works her way in?
Sure. Okay, Sally Sloan. Yeah, we'll come back to Shirley.
Let's go ahead with Sally, and then we'll have
Okay.
Shirley go right after
She
Sally.
can be on deck here.
Good morning. I'm Sally Sloan with the Indiana Federation of Teachers. The IFT urges you to be responsible about action today and to table action on REPA 2 until you have an opportunity to actually assess what's happened with REPA 1. We're thankful that you've listened to comments made by the public in the past, in the last few months, and you've made some minor changes. We think you've also made some major changes. We believe that those major changes call for setting this back, taking time, and possibly even starting over with hearings. A major change that you have made is to have the change from the IDOE and the elected superintendent in 2 areas, one in teacher education programs and 2 in content area tests for licensure, as well as the cut scores for those. We believe that that calls for new hearings. We're concerned about the building level changes, the building level administrator changes in REPA 2. We can now have a temporary building administrator or principal. This is not possible currently. And with the rollbacks in standards and temporary licensing, you can expect to see cronyism and nepotism that we saw 30 years ago in public schools. It's not too much of a stretch to imagine that teachers will receive effective and highly effective ratings in order to help them, because they're friends, to become public administrators. With the changes in evaluations, we think that these administrators need more education, more classroom experience, and more support. The teachers' careers depend on these administrators. Please do not diminish the ability of the administrators. Your changes in requirements for licensures dumbfound us. It's not appropriate to remove the pedagogical training that is required for classroom preparation. What you're saying is anyone could be assigned to certain classrooms that have already been specified today by simply passing a test. We think this is inappropriate. It's not good for teachers, it's not good for highly effective teachers, and that certainly is not good for students. Thank you.
Shirley Wright. Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak today. We appreciate that very much. I represent the Indiana Middle Level Education Association. Our membership includes central office administrators, building level administrators, and teachers throughout the state. We actually have in membership over 5,000 of that combination, and our board of directors includes that. Personally, I'm the executive director of IMLEA. I'm also a member of the National Forum to Accelerate Middle Grade Reform, and I'm also the affiliate director for the state of Indiana as a member of the Association for Middle Level Education. So I'm talking about middle level students And when we talk about middle level students, most of the response when you tell them that you're a middle level educator is, oh, God bless you. And the reason for that being is because our middle level kids are a little difficult at that age, as we all know. And one of the things that's most important to middle level educators is how do we reach them? Because you can know everything you want to know about a subject, but if you don't reach them, you won't get anywhere. And if all of us think about the teachers that are standing out in our backgrounds, in our previous school experience, all of us would think back to someone who made that class interesting. Interesting so that you listened and you learned. And in middle level education, that's really number one. All of the criteria that we base our studies on, how do we reach them, how do we get to them, how do we get them to listen to us, is based on understanding those kids, understanding that age, understanding that level. A lot of the things we hear today about differentiated education, that's teaching multiple, that's teaching multiple levels of IQ, let's say, in the same room, having gifted children along with kind of special needs children, along with general education, all in the same room. I think that in reaching them, we have to have pedagogy and we have to have content. I doubt that any of you in any of your careers would ever say it's not only what you know, it's how to do it. My father worked for IBM and was a salesman and then a sales manager. And I can tell you that he could know everything about computers and typewriters there was to know. But if he couldn't go out and communicate that to people who needed those, then he wasn't going to make a sale. And basically that's what education to me is all about. And of course what I'm saying to you is, first of all, please table this so that you get the opportunity to really study it. Thank you. And secondly, you know, this is it's the adjunct teacher permit is really an insult to all of us as educators. Thank you.
The next two are Carol Craig and Bob Shanks, in case someone's in the overflow room, you'll know.
Good morning, Dr. Bennett and the board, and good morning to everyone here. I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am the co-chair of the Education Committee for the Greater Indianapolis NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I'm also a former principal, retired principal, and also retired Human Resources Director for 9 years as a Human Resources Director. I'm speaking to you from 2 points. It's regarding REPA 2, because when we look at all of the factors that are correlated with student achievement, the first one is teacher quality, and teacher quality is not the same as teacher quantity. When we look at the lens of how we evaluate any policy and any program, we should be looking at it from a vantage point of quality. And what we're concerned about here, particularly from the NAACP, is the potential for unintended consequences. And the unintended consequences of any policy or any law fall flatly on the children who are most disaffected. And those are the children who currently are lower performing in their academic achievement. As a Human Resources Director, all my years counseling and working with teachers who were struggling, the majority of those teachers were struggling because of their lack of pedagogy and their inability to form the appropriate relationships with students and connect the content to the learning for the student. And this says nothing about the critical nature of content knowledge. That's a given for any teacher. Any teacher has to be competent in content. But the literature shows that for competence in education, and particularly in the years that were just mentioned, the middle and high school years, where we do see more deficits in academic achievement, it's absolutely necessary to have that appropriate pedagogy. But what may happen with the unintended consequences is that we're not paying attention to Linda Darling-Hammond's work on equity. And I don't hear the word equity,
Who are the children more likely? With the high teacher turnover, it's more likely to be the urban areas where we have the high numbers of minority children and ELL children. So I ask you to reconsider and bring this back for further discussion. Thank you.
Bob Shanks.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about REPA 2. I'm here today because I have 2 grandchildren who receive their education in the schools of Indiana. I'm confident that we've all known a great teacher, and certainly a great teacher has command of their subject matter, no question about that. If we didn't have that knowledge, it couldn't be a great teacher. However, as we reflect on this truth, I'm certain that we've all also encountered teachers who might have been brilliant in their area of expertise, but were not good teachers. Knowing subject matter doesn't necessarily mean that a teacher can convey that knowledge to students in a really understandable way. I've heard it said that teachers don't teach subjects such as English or math, rather they teach students. Let's reflect on what that means. It's also been said that to know a subject thoroughly, one should teach it to someone else. Learning theory is what makes us aware individual students may learn differently. Some are visual, others auditory, some are concrete sequential learners. I know from personal experience with my own 2 children that what works with one does not necessarily work with the other one. Teachers have to recognize these differences and adjust their teaching styles to accommodate the way each individual student learns. Teacher preparation needs to be much more than just learning the subject matter that you're going to be teaching. Coursework in child psychology, child development, learning theory should be part of what a teacher has to train for in order to get ready to teach. Classes in methodology, observation of classrooms, and student teaching should be requirements for teacher preparation. In fact, students who do not do well in these areas should not be encouraged to go into the field of teaching. They should go find a job somewhere else. I'm sure you accept an appointment with this board as a public service, and you're trying to do what the school system of Indiana should do. You're trying to guide them in the right direction. However, a rush to judgment on REPA 2 may cause unanticipated consequences both for educators and for students. It's more important to make progress than to make haste. An approach that explores all aspects of decision before taking action is truly the hallmark of wisdom. I urge you to postpone consideration of REPA 2 until you have heard from all the voices. Thank you very much.
Vic Smith, followed by Kate Miller.
Dr. Bennett, members of the board, I'm Vic Smith, retired educator. Thank you for this opportunity. I urge you to table the REPA 2 rules on your agenda today until the major new changes revealed just last Friday can be reviewed with additional public hearings. The changes revealed in the revised rule last Friday are substantial. Number 1, the revised draft shifts the authority for approving teacher education programs at universities from the department, as is current practice, to the State Board of Education. Number 2, the revised draft cuts the classroom experience required for administrator license from 5 years down to 2 years, and would count teaching experience in higher education as classroom experience to qualify for a K-12 administrative license, either as a building level administrator or as a superintendent. This is a highly controversial subject to current administrators. No definition of how much teaching in higher education constitutes a creditable year is included in the rule. Reducing the amount of teaching experience required and eliminating the need for experience in K-12 classrooms should be subjects of additional public hearings. And number 3, the revised draft changes the approval of the content area tests required for licensure and the setting of the cut scores from the department to the State Board of Education. The legal question here is whether the rule can be revised in these major ways at the last minute without triggering the need for another round of public hearings. Past practice in my 15 years of watching state board rules go through the promulgation process has been that if hearings resulted in minor changes, those minor changes were made and the rule was passed. But if major changes were made, the rules were resubmitted for an additional round of hearings. Now, I'm no lawyer, but I looked up the law. It's IC 4-22-2-29, It says an agency may not adopt a rule that substantially differs from the version or versions of the proposed rule or rules published in the Indiana Register under Section 24, unless it is a logical outgrowth of any proposed rule as supported by written comments submitted during the public comment period. It must be debatable whether all of these changes are supported by public comments. I oppose these changes. These revisions are major changes, and under past practice, a new public hearing on the revised language should be in order. I urge you to bring these major subjects revealed for the first time last Friday to the public for additional public hearings. Thank you very much.
Kate Miller.
Thank you for this opportunity. Hello, Dr. Bennett. Hello, Dan. I'm a graduate from Marian University now. It was Marian College when I graduated from there. I'm a teacher at Warren Township. I teach 8th grade language arts. I, too, am really concerned about REPA 2 because I find it insulting that teachers are not included in every aspect of development of this rule, that we are constantly looking at our data, constantly trying to adjust our curriculum to our students as individuals, not just a test. It is important that our colleges are also involved in this because good teachers come from a good liberal arts background where they can become experts in not only their chosen field but a wide and developed area. Well-rounded teachers are important. To say that anybody can teach is not true. It is an art. It is an art that you develop over years. I am not the same teacher I was my first year of teaching. I will not be the same teacher next year that I am this year because I take everything into consideration. I take my children that come to me each year. I take my curriculum. I make changes. I look at the data. The test is not everything. It is not who I am, and it is not who my students are. It is important that we relook at these with open dialogue so that we are creating rules for licensing that are truly helpful to our teachers. To quote George Orwell, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we must not fall into that. We are a democracy. And democracy demands that everyone is heard, respectfully heard. Thank you.
Next up is Jill Lyday, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Okay. Followed by Melissa Keller.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing us all the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Jill Lyday, and I recently retired after 37 years as an English teacher at North Central High School in Washington Township. I believe the members of the State Board of Education must postpone voting on this controversial plan to change teacher and administrator licensing rules. You must respect the voters' resounding support of a change in the direction for education policy in this state. Glenda Ritz, the superintendent-elect of public instruction, is highly qualified to speak to this plan. She is one of just 155 national board-certified teachers in Indiana. In fact, she serves on the board of directors for the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. Furthermore, she has been involved in reviewing educational policy, including teacher preparation, licensing, and evaluation at the state and national levels. After the recent election, Secretary of Education Arne Duncan invited Glenda to attend the Council of Chief State School Officers Annual Policy Forum in Savannah, Georgia. This national nonpartisan nonprofit organization brings together the top education leaders from every state in the nation. Now, Glenda has the respect of national education leaders. Here at home, however, it appears that every attempt is being made to stifle her before she can even assume the office to which 1.3 million voters elected her. I promise you, with all due respect, if you vote on REPA 2 today without allowing the new superintendent of public instruction to offer her vision and plans regarding teacher and administrator licensing and evaluation, your actions will be seen by citizens of this state as purely political and having nothing whatsoever to do with the improvement of education for Indiana's children. I certainly hope you do not want to create the appearance of such political shenanigans at this very critical point. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Melissa Keller.
Good morning. My name is Melissa Keller. I've been an educator for 30 years. I've been an elementary teacher in both public and private schools, a public elementary school principal, and a teacher educator. I'm also the parent of 2 children, one of whom is still in public high school. Like many others in this assembly today, I come to you with grave concerns about changes proposed in REPA 2. The change that concerns me the most is the allowance of an adjunct teaching permit, which would be granted to persons without teacher preparation. A minimum requirement of graduating college with a 3.0 and passing a content test does not prepare a person to do all that goes into the work of teaching. It will not prepare a teacher to know how to set up a classroom environment that optimizes each child's learning and development. It will not help a person understand how to differentiate instruction for children with different learning styles and needs. This person will not have had any instruction or practice in the field in creating and implementing engaging lessons, or assessing children's understanding of the curriculum, or getting a 5-year-old to sit in a desk if he refuses. We hear a great deal about our governor's commitment to education reform. How can Governor Daniels and Governor-elect Pence be committed to our students when they do not believe in the training of each school's most important assets, its teachers? Would you want your children taught by people who have never taken a course in how to teach, who've never practiced teaching in the field before being given the responsibility of teaching your child how to read, or figure quarterly interest on a loan, or understand the difference between a democratic and an autocratic system of government? I wouldn't. Our children are the people who will one day create new computer systems, repair airplanes, build roads and bridges, write symphonies, seek cure for diabetes, and fight for justice in our courts. They need and deserve trained teachers. The teachers I've seen without preparation display poor judgment in their teaching practices, a lack of understanding of basic academic assessments, and this is key, they don't last. If you want to attract the best and the brightest and retain them as they acquire mastery in their work, do not tell potential teachers that this is a job anyone can do. Do not waste our children's time as they wait for their teachers to understand how to manage a class, much less teach. And do not say that you are committed to teachers' contributions to our children when you cannot even schedule this meeting at a time when teachers could attend. The people of Indiana voiced their discontent with Dr. Bennett's proposals by electing Glenda Ritz as our new state superintendent. To proceed as if this did not happen is a slap in the face of the democratic process. I stand before you today, one among many, asking you to listen to reason from parents and teachers who have the best interests of their students in mind. I ask you to do the right thing by tabling REPA 2 until its implications have been thoroughly examined. Thank you.
Wendy Marianchik? Sick?
Becky, since he changed the agenda, I would have signed up, so it's going to be at the end.
Wouldn't matter, Joe. You had to sign before the meeting started.
Well, but I thought the public comments were going to be at the end. Wouldn't it matter?
Good morning. I'm here as an educator and a parent. I'm here to urge you to table the vote on REPA 2.
When I testified last June, I shared my personal research I conducted on 36 pre-service special education and general education teachers from IU who entered their first year teaching jobs and their testimonies on how reliant they were on specific aspects of their teacher training in establishing themselves and navigating those first years. They especially identified coursework, curriculum-embedded projects, and behavioral development and assessment as essential to getting on their feet. But today, what I want to do is I want to focus on some of the truths about how schools become stronger by using validated research. I'm going to also bring up the same book that was brought up before, The Flat World in Education by Linda Darling Hammond. If you have not read this book, I urge you to read this book, and particularly before you make this vote on REPA 2. Linda Darling Hammond is a renowned, respected educational leader and researcher from Stanford who was also in the running for Secretary of Education. She's committed her life and research in understanding what makes schools and educators and children succeed. It's complex, but minimizing teacher preparation is absolutely the wrong direction. Indeed, we need to make improvements in education, and I think we already have. But what Darling Hammond elucidates in her brilliant work on effective reform is the following. She advocates for well-prepared and well-supported teachers, strong teaching faculties with organized structures that create clarity and promote community, in a working environment to create a caring environment, and this results in higher performance and less teacher attrition in schools. Teachers with stronger initial preparation typically stay in teaching significantly longer. This is an issue that needs to be considered. As you're trying to promote more teachers into the field, you're going to lose more teachers if they're not prepared to handle what they're facing in the classroom. The other thing that I wanted to briefly mention is that there are 3 countries that have made incredible improvement in the world and success in focusing their investments on teacher preparation and development. And they have seen great strides and in comparison to the rest of the world. And they have, the things they've done is they moved from a highly centralized system emphasizing external testing to a more localized system in which highly trained teachers design curriculum around very lean national standards implemented through equity funding. And she promotes this very much. Okay. And the last thing I just want to say is I appreciate this time. I've been an educator and trained in Indiana, and I have trained teachers in this state, and it would be a shame to lose what we've built. I'm very proud of being trained in the state of Indiana. Thank you for your time.
Kathy Fuentes Rohr. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yep. Okay.
Hi, my name is Kathy Fuentes Rohr, and I'm a mother of 4 children in public schools. Today I represent my friends who are at home with their kids all across the state or at work. I entrust my children to the care of professionals, their teachers, every day. It appalls me that we could expect someone who has passed one test in a subject to be qualified as a teacher. There's so much more to teaching than can be placed on a test. Teachers need to be experts in child development, as we've said, and in different methods that work for different learning styles. Teaching is not a quantifiable science of input and output. It is a complex activity involving complex human interaction. Student teachers need to learn from mentor teachers on the job, because it's one thing to pass a test in content matter, no matter how passionate you are about it, and it's an entirely different thing to try to get that content across to a room full of 13-year-olds. I assume REPA 2 is another example of the business model and the business lens taking over public education. I've seen this lowering of teacher quality on model bills by ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, an organization which would see public schools turned into for-profit ventures. This flexibility of licensing teachers probably means flexibility of businesses to create different models of teacher training, like Teach for America. This complete disregard for already established programs of schools of education is a disregard for the profession as a whole. I'm sure that businesses in the Chamber of Commerce can create the strategic plans and outlines for making profits, but I don't understand how they can begin to assume they are experts in education and all the research that points to quality teacher programs, research which does not support Repa-2 in any way. The fact that schools are not factories outputting workers for our economy, the fact is that schools are not factories outputting workers for our economy. They're places of learning where experts in child development help kids learn and grow to be the citizens of tomorrow. The bottom line for schools is children. Teachers are the I skipped. Wait. Okay, teachers' educational background must be as deep and rich as the learning they will help to encourage on the job. Don't buy this business model of a low-skilled replaceable laborer easily and cheaply replaced by the next Pearson-backed teacher program test taker. Teaching is an art and a service, and teachers are professionals. My children's education is not a commodity to be bought and sold, and nor should their teachers' education be.
Laura Smith and Phyllis Bush.
Good morning. My name is Laura Fred Smith, and I work at a really small high school in Winamac, Indiana. We have about 450 students. I'm not here to give you any research about what REPA will do or what it might do. I'm here to tell you a story of a student teacher that we just had. He is a person who has a degree from Ball State in journalism. After some time and not being able to find a job doing what he wanted to do, he was told that he might be able to be a teacher. So he went to an online-only university out of Colorado. So he had never been in any classes that taught methods. When I went through education, I taught a social studies class and a science class and taught reading to people that struggled reading. He didn't have to do any of that. He spent a few hours as a kind of an aide in a special ed room with kids that had 3rd and 4th grade reading levels. His goal is to be a high school science or a high school English teacher, senior level, teaching AP classes and college prep classes, as well as whatever remedial classes that we had. When he came to us 6 weeks ago, he could not speak by looking at people in the eye. He mumbled and he looked at his shoes the entire time. He came with no classroom management experience. He had no idea of the kind of classroom discipline he wanted to run. He actually, just last week in his 6th week of teaching there, he allowed students in the classroom while he was standing there to pile all of their desk chairs up in a pyramid and then climb on top of them while he was standing in there this entire time. He didn't feel that he could tell the student that you shouldn't be standing on top of all of these chairs because he didn't know how to approach it, apparently. He does say that he likes the English language a lot. He loves the English language, and that's why he wanted to be a teacher. However, he came to us with no skills to do that. The students didn't respect him. They didn't listen. And part of the time when he was giving a taped video lesson, there was kids throwing paper wads in the back and sleeping. And he is one of those people that I'm afraid that with these new REPA laws, we'll have more of these. In an education program in a college, a state university, those kind of kids those people can get weeded out a little bit. You know, they'll be pushed into earlier times in their career, they'll be pushed into education settings where they will be responsible for classroom discipline, and he didn't have that. If we have a change where student teaching is not required, I would ask that you would think about having substitute teaching required. Because as we heard earlier, somebody substitute taught, and he liked the opportunity he had substitute teaching, and then he decided to go ahead and get his teacher's license. This person has had none of that, and he was teaching. We actually asked him to leave at the beginning of the week because we couldn't subject our kids to any more of his inability to teach. Thank you.
Phyllis Bush. Yes. Neil.
My name is Phyllis Bush, and I'm a retired Fort Wayne Community Schools teacher for 32 years, and I'd like to thank the board for the opportunity of allowing me to speak today. Since everybody has said pretty much everything that I've already had written down. I'm going to kind of give some random thoughts. And first of all, this seems like a solution in search of a problem, because we already have waivers in place that people can get teaching license, get certified, not certified, but they can be able to teach without a license until they can get certified. Second of all, one of the things that really bothers me is the assumption that teachers are not accountable, which I think is I do not know a teacher who is not willing to be accountable. In my days of teaching, I got evaluated on a pretty regular basis, and not that I looked forward to it, but I always took it pretty doggone seriously if there was something that needed to be worked on. And I think most teachers do want to be evaluated, and they want to be held accountable. One of the things that I think is missing in this whole discussion that I keep hearing over and over again, I'm not hearing the whole child being mentioned. And one of the things that I learned when I was in school, when I was going to school to learn how to be a teacher, was the whole child. Child is not a client. The child is not a patron. It's a kid. It's not a test score. We need to be mindful that we are working with children who come from different places and they have different opportunities and so on. And not all of them are going to get in the right achievement level. I was just telling some people on our very long drive at 6 o'clock this morning that I ran into a student that I had 32 years ago, or 30 years ago. And I remember her absolute courage when she was telling me that she was one of 9 children taking care of a mentally disturbed child in her family, and that school was the only safe place in her whole life. Okay, how do you measure that? How does that show up on REPA 2? Anyway, back to my point again. I'm babbling. The one thing I would like to say in conclusion is lowering standards is not a way to make things happen in the classroom. Second of all, content area is important, because most people wouldn't be a teacher if they didn't love their content area. But also we need to value pedagogy, practice, and persistence to be a good teacher. I would respectfully request that you would table REPA 2. Thank you.
Rachel Burke. Regina Weir. Oh, okay. Are you Rachel? Yes. Okay. No, that's all right.
Dr. Bennett, members of the board, thank you for the ability to speak with you today. I am Rachel Burke, the State Legislative Coordinator for Indiana PTA. It is our belief that all students benefit from high-quality teachers. The more challenging student populations are disproportionately taught by less educated educators, experienced educators. And teachers will need to be qualified, diverse, and well-prepared to meet the needs of today's students. And that standards regarding teacher education, licensing, hiring, and professional development make an important difference in the qualifications and capacities that teachers bring to their world, and thus contribute to their work. Sorry, I should not have run over here. And thus contribute to enhancing quality and equity in public education. And in order to fulfill the state and national goal of closing the achievement gap, low-income and diverse students must no longer be denied their fair share of the learning opportunities that ensure that their success in school, such as resources and best teachers, and a strong, balanced accountability system leads to more effective teaching and a higher student achievement. Therefore, we support high standards for teacher preparation and licensing. We are opposed to test-based content area licensure for educators. We are also opposed to the adjunct teaching license for the same reason. We support programs and policies that promote equitable distribution of high-quality teachers, thereby encouraging the academic achievement of all students. And we fear that allowing expanded testing to these content areas will disproportionately harm those students most affected by the achievement gap. We question how the Department of Education, the superintendent, and the legislature can say that they are working towards professionalizing the teaching profession while at the same time removing the educational requirement for those in the profession. We believe in and support professional practitioner license with the requirements of 5 years of K-12 experience and an appropriate degree background for administrators. Thank you.
Debbie went to see if the last individual's available. Regina?
Excuse me.
Yes.
I was in the overflow room and I don't think I could hear too well. Thank you, everyone, for the chance to talk with you today about this important matter. I'm speaking today as a mother of 2 beautiful children who are school age and also as an educator. I began teaching in 1994 and I've enjoyed the career path that teaching provided me. I recently completed my PhD in special education and look forward to my career as an educator. I decided to drive over an hour today to attend this meeting to voice my concerns and also appreciation for the work that you have been doing. I appreciate some of the changes that have recently been made to the REPA 2 proposal, and I appreciate how many of the changes reflect comments received back in the spring from the public. However, due to limitations today, time limitations, I would like to just address 2 concerns. Today there have been so many people that have addressed many concerns, and I think this tells us a lot about where we're at currently with this proposal. It is clear that substantial changes have been made to the proposal that was just released on Friday, and based on what was discussed back in the spring when we did public comments. As you are aware, the responsibilities embedded in much of this proposal shifts oversight from the IDOE to the State Board of Education. For example, one of the most controversial changes in the proposal is the proposal to shift the authority for approving programs to the IDOE, from the IDOE to the SBOE, the State Board of Education. I believe this change will turn the State Board of Education into a bureaucracy that it was not intended to function as. Since the state superintendent is an elected position, I believe decision-making should remain with the IDOE at this time. There has been not been enough time for citizens of Indiana to deliberate on the shifting of power. For this reason, I believe it's critical that we table this proposal and decision today so there's more time to consider public comments. We are putting the cart before the horse if we do not at least hear public comments and provide ample time for the public and board to consider changes just released on Friday. The other item I wish to address is related to the adjunct teacher permit, which a lot of people have addressed today. I think we have all known people knowledgeable in a content that we might admire and appreciate this knowledge, science, math, literature, but it's also clear that not everyone who has content knowledge can teach children. The current system of providing emergency permits makes more sense when it comes to areas that are shortages in license areas. Only emergency basis should a person be allowed to teach without some training and instructional strategies and evidence-based practice. Under the current system, when emergency permits are provided, it requires that the grantee of the certification demonstrate they are attending a certification program and working towards certification. I would recommend that for now we keep emphasizing coursework around pedagogy until a better system has been conceived for shortcutting traditional teacher education. Given the current emphasis on accountability, high teacher quality, performance, and evidence-based practice, it's critical we should not cut short the licensure process. Please consider tabling the proposal today and giving more time for public deliberation. Thank you.
It's the end of the public comment.
All right, we will move now to the action.
Let's get this stuff out of the way.
Okay.
So.
We have Risa Renier and Michelle McGowan to come in for item A. Probably waiting through the.
They're watching and are on their way.
Yeah, I'm sure that's good.
Chair, I think.
Is there something else we can do?
Neil, while if you don't mind, I'll step out if you will handle the F. You don't even need to switch chairs. I'll just step out while we do F.
Becky, you're going to have to help me through that.
Okay, we're going to move to action item F. These are the adjudications to determine the amount of tuition support to be withheld from IPS and Gary Community Schools. We'll take them one at a time. You have the notice and recommendation that was provided to IPS, as well as IPS's letter concurring with our recommendation. If you have questions on that, this is, in legal terms, this is a little bit like summary judgment. There is no controversy here. You do need to take action to approve or deny the recommended amount of tuition support. As you can see, it's based on the actual ADM count from September 2012. So I would pass it back to Neil now.
Okay, thank you. As I did before, Tony's asked me to just chair this administrative process. Becky's explained it pretty well. Do any of the board members have questions about this issue from IPS and about the amount of funds that are going to be withheld?
Neil, would you like me to start with a motion to approve and then?
I think that'd be great. But yeah, okay, let's do that before okay, that'd be great.
Well, I move we approve the recommendation in the.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions about the motion or about the letter from IPS or about the amount that's in question? Okay, hearing none, can I ask for a vote, please? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much.
Similarly, with Gary Community Schools, the department made the recommendation based on the ADM count in September 2012. Gary sent a response late last night. I've provided you a copy this morning in which they concur with this particular recommendation, and you'll note they continue to reserve their right to dispute the previous decision. So all that's on the table now is the amount for the first 6 months of the 2013 calendar year.
Okay, so again, can I ask for a motion to...
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask for a second on the motion? Okay, so the motion is to approve the agreement, the amount that has been discussed between the department and Gary. Are there any questions from the board on this motion? Any comments? Okay, hearing none, let me ask for a vote. All the board members in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Sylvia's not participating.
Okay. So, abstain.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Lisa is coming through the door.
And as is Michelle.
As is Michelle.
Can I just ask a point of clarification while we're getting ready? If there are any changes proposed and agreed to by the board today, would we have to then vote again on the rules next month, or can we do that in the context of still passing the rules with some changes?
Pass the rules with changes.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
I'm sorry, Neil, did you ask if we can pass with the change?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Risa.
Trying to catch my breath. I just ran a sprint back and forth down the hallway. Yeah. You received some documents in preparation for this agenda item, one of which is a chart that tracks the changes from the original REPA 1 licensing rules that were promulgated in 2010, the changes that the original version of REPA 2 would make, and then the column on the right hand is changes that have been recommended by staff as a result of reviewing the many public comments that we received and many internal discussions. The right-hand column then represents changes that we are suggesting to the REPA 2 version before it's finalized. And we can go through those, but we have a PowerPoint
that highlights those changes that I think is very easy for you to follow. And we're going to talk about the PowerPoint, and then you can follow along. We'll tell you where those changes are in your chart so that you can follow along. Okay, I'll follow along.
We went faster than I thought. The first is just background. As you all know, the reason that we are promulgating REPA into Title 511 is because of the changes from the General Assembly. They did not move the rules out of Title 515 to Title 511 when they moved the authority to the State Board of Education, which required us to promulgate the rules. We had a public hearing in June. As you all have seen, we received just under 700 public comments, whether it was through public testimony at the hearing itself, through the online form, or being emailed to Becky Bowman, our State Board Administrator. And we compiled those, as you received, in a kind of a summary table. And we tried to put them in themes, try to identify some qualitative themes and what the comments were, and identify the corresponding public comments so that if you want to read those public comments, you can look at the comments themselves. After going through those, we have a handful of changes that the department, a team of us, have recommended from the proposed version to the final version. The first change is removing evaluation from licensure. So the tie of 3 out of 5 effective evaluations in order to receive what was going to be called a professional license. Our recommendation is to remove all of those links. And then rather than having those titles of probationary and professional, we want to restore language more like what was in REPA 1, which would be initial practitioner and then practitioner licenses. And then these would all be 5-year licenses, which was consistent with what was in the published version of REPA 2. Another recommendation that we have is to exclude 4 areas from what would be... There were several areas added where you could add a content area through testing alone. We would like to exempt 4 areas from that. Uh-huh.
Licensure and evaluation. I mean, for people who claim that they're so concerned about teachers as professionals and being respected, making sure we have highly qualified teachers in our classroom, one would think that we would want to connect licensure after a certain point to how the teachers actually do and how they actually perform. So it surprises me a little bit that we want to move away from that.
Neil, the biggest reason, I would suggest this is the largest reason, is one of the discussions we've had with, that we got from public comment, as well as we got from speaking some of our legislative leadership, was the ability to hire should still be at the local level. And a teacher may not perform well in one district. That doesn't mean that teacher can't be successful in another district in another place, which means that really it shouldn't be the responsibility of the state to tell a local school district you can't hire that person. And so it was really kind of to honor that idea and that concept that while it is clearly the function of the local school board to make the decision whether to retain a teacher or not based on the evaluation, that it's also the authority of the local school board, the next local school board, whether they want to hire that person or not.
So just to clarify, that same point applies for new teachers as well, or for teachers who might have come through the process through an alternative certification process.
And that
it's still the decision of the local board or the principal to hire that teacher.
That's exactly right.
Licensing is just a minimum way to get in the door to even be considered. Thank you for clarifying that, Tony.
And Neil, I think while we're on that, I was going to bring this up later, but one has to look at all of this in a whole, as a whole. If we've been working hard for a lot of years on different aspects here. One is general accountability that's very simple to understand that everybody sees. And we've also tried to make sure decisions respecting the idea of subsidiarity, you make decisions closest to the level where people are most competent and are responsible for the decision. Mike hires a teacher. You've made a decision with your collaborators through extensive interviews. But you're going to be accountable, and it's going to be well understood how children are learning. And if desks are being piled up and kids are climbing on a setter, you're going to be accountable for that. And so you're going to hire people that are competent, and you're going to manage it, and you're going to be responsible. And it's more clear now than ever how your school's doing in a lot of significant ways, even beyond tests, culture, et cetera, and school improvement and growth. So there's a whole theme throughout this, it seems to me, we have to eventually trust that people who are going to ultimately be responsible face-to-face with their constituents, and it's going to be well described and understood, have to have the freedom to get the very best educator in the classroom and administrators to lead the schools, because they are going to be ultimately accountable in this regard and every other regard. So
it's a good point.
It's kind of a whole theme so you can't just look at this particular issue. You got to look at it in the whole of what we've been trying to do is give more authority to people who are going to be accountable for the education of those children and who they hire, and if they want to they see an opportunity in someone who's non-traditionally been educated, et cetera, their departments, their fellow colleagues in teaching, principals, superintendents, boards are ultimately going to take responsibility for that.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, but
It's
a good point,
question,
though,
Rick.
in the whole, I think.
So again, with REPA 2, there are a handful of areas that we've added where you could add those content areas through testing alone. However, after listening to the public comment, we would recommend that 4 of those areas be exempt from the ability to add them through testing alone. Those are early childhood, elementary education.
Excluded or?
Excluded.
Yeah, that's
I'm trying to
another
be
word,
careful with my
Yeah, I
multiple double
understand.
negatives.
Which would mean that those individuals in these areas would need to have coursework and training in addition to passing
When
the
you
test.
said exempted, you couldn't ensure with that. They don't have to take a test?
Yeah,
It's not-
so
both
with REPA
and.
2, originally we were going to allow out all content areas to be added through testing alone,
Thank
and we would like to take a step back for these 4 areas, which are special education, communication disorders, early childhood, and elementary education.
So again, I apologize for interrupting. I guess this is the right time to ask questions or make comment. So again, some of the testimony we heard about unqualified people not having pedagogical training teaching reading to young people is wrong, because teaching elementary you have to have some kind of you can't do that by test alone. You can't get a license to teach elementary education with just a test alone. Is that correct?
Not with our recommendation, but
Right.
I believe the public testimony was a reflection of the proposed version of REPA 2.
Not what we heard today. I'm just trying to make sure I've got this right in my head.
So I believe that, again, I think that testimony was reflecting what they saw as the published version of REPA 2, where this recommendation had not been made.
I see.
And those
Okay.
would have been areas where you
Okay.
could add through testing
So
alone.
we'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that. Okay, fair enough.
Was high ability considered at any point under the exceptional needs? 'Cause it's listed as a main category, but I'm just curious. We talk more at the low end of the spectrum and the high end of the spectrum, if that was ever a consideration.
So high ability is not one of the accepted areas. Exceptional needs, in the next slide actually, I'll go ahead and flip to it. We're going to recommend that we maintain the 4 areas as they were in REPA 1. So
Can I also ask about, there's some very thoughtful testimony today about a couple of the other areas that are all test only. The one that I'm just curious about, what was your thinking about English as a second language? That does seem to be something that is really tough to teach, really needs some, it's not just a matter of what you know about English, but how you get through to people who haven't learned to speak English from birth. So what was your thinking about making that a test-only
we
category?
We were certainly trying to balance what we believed was the board intention of trying to add as many areas as areas that you could add through testing alone with the multitude of public comments. And we tried to look at kind of our most vulnerable groups of students and areas where the testimony and research really supported having the pedagogy. If you all wanted to add ESL as an area, that would be, if you want to add it to an area that's exempt so that it could not be added to through testing alone, then we could certainly do that.
Is there
I understand we have that authority and responsibility. I'm just trying to understand what prompted you to, what your thinking was, so I can kind of best make that decision.
I think that there was the purpose of having all of those content areas opened up as areas that could be added by testing was to enhance the opportunities that teachers have to demonstrate their content knowledge and expand their license options, and also then to help local administrators with staffing because they would have teachers who could add additional areas to their licenses and help with staffing issues. But again, it's a balance. Right. And so we certainly, whatever your will is today, we recognize that.
Okay, thank you.
One change that we're making is there were several areas where the authority had been with the Professional Standards Board. I'm saying that incorrectly. And we were going to shift that to the department, but after public comment, we have recommended that be shifted back to the state board in order for it to have greater transparency and actions would be taken in a public meeting. And we also are recommending that when the board is approving programs, that there would be criteria to be considered by the board. And then from here forward, we're just going to outline what REPA 2 looks like with these recommendations included. The transition to teaching will continue, and emergency permits are continued. If you looked in your chart, there is a little technical change that we've made. We didn't highlight it on the PowerPoint, but it is in your chart where when we first drafted emergency permits, we left out the bachelor's degree requirement. We have put that back in, and that is on your chart. But other than that, emergency permits are continued. Adding content areas through testing are continued, and temporary superintendent licenses are continued. And we've listed on here on the slide how many have been granted through the department to show that these have been popular and used by folks in Indiana. In the vein of increasing options, one change is that a master's degree will no longer be required for obtaining a principal's license. Well, it could be a master's degree, but it just requires that an individual complete an approved program in building level administration. So this goes back to what I just mentioned, that there would be a criteria that the board would consider when determining whether or not to approve a program.
So we would approve what the list of what that definition of approved programs represented.
Yes. So
there aren't any now, or are there? Mm-hmm. Or we'd have to do that in the next meeting, or
there are not any non-higher ed approved programs at this point in time, but there's the possibility that someone from a non-higher education program could propose this.
I'm sorry. So, but you do have to complete some kind of program. You can't just have a bachelor's degree and experience in business and management. You could manage a 5,000 employee business.
Correct.
A lot of skills in management, but you still have to take some kind of program that's designed to help you understand this.
There's a certification.
Yeah. Okay.
Separate from a master's, separate from a GED.
It's just not. It's just you don't need a formal master's degree.
Right.
Okay.
Currently, there are teacher standards in all of our content areas and all of our administrative areas, and the approved programs that exist now that have been brought to us by universities and have been approved, they demonstrate through their documentation when they submit a program how they are meeting all of the licensing standards for those particular areas. And we're simply suggesting that there would still be a process whereby either a university or a non-higher ed organization would bring forth their program and document for you how their program meets the educator standards for that area, and then you would approve it.
Got it.
And
Okay.
that's what we do now.
Thank you for that clarification.
And if it's not approved, then they can't, there's no certification available, correct? So that approval would have to come from this board, and then they would have the option of giving a certification.
For an Indiana license, they would, in Indiana, if they would need to complete an approved program, which is something.
Is that common practice that this board approve programs like that?
The Professional Standards Board previously did approve all programs. And
Okay.
so that authority, since they are no longer in existence, that authority then would be transferred to you.
Okay,
in this
and
rule.
originally you were transferring that
To the department.
To the DOE.
Yes, but based on public testimony, we are proposing that in the final version of Rep 2, that authority be with the state board.
Becky, do you see that as appropriate?
If that's what the board wants.
And that's what REPA 2 recommended too, if I'm not mistaken. Many of the members on REPA 1, I'm sorry, they felt like the transparency was incredibly important.
Well, and in the Professional Standard Board, was a delegated authority from the legislature or this board? This board.
No, statutory.
It was statutory. And then that was sent back really to us to decide how that, so it'll be in a larger public forum. Okay.
Right.
And we'll go through the rule, we'll have a process. And
So, okay, so review that with me. So originally in statute, there was a...
Created Professional Standard Board.
There was a Professional Standard
Legislature
Board.
gave it back to us, now we have to decide.
Gave it to the state board?
Yes.
And then the state board was responsible for deciding who that went to for approval?
Or we could delegate it out,
How it was managed.
I would think.
The statute gave it to the board.
Yes.
The board initially thought the department might do it. Public testimony said the board should do it for transparency purposes. And Rep 2, your recommendations are the board should do it. Is that-
Yes. The
So
process
that's the process that it's,
right.
I appreciate
The
it.
department staff would review the programs and the documentation and would be bringing you that information with our recommendation, and then you would be taking the final action on the program approval.
So
And-
that's not
Or
really
not.
different.
And there's transparency then to the public of
Yeah.
what's being approved.
Exactly.
Just for clarification, is it the 2 years or the 5 years experience required then for the building level administrator license?
It's 2 years.
It is
2 years.
Ask that question again, please.
I was on the chart. It reads that it increases the prerequisite teaching experience from 2 years to a minimum of 5 years by virtue of a prerequisite professional practitioner license. So my question was: is it the 2 years, or is it, in all actuality, a 5-year?
But you're looking at the yellow column, and if you look
I'm
at the
sorry.
gray, that's
Okay.
our
Got it.
it's our handy color coded
So what
table.
page- what
The
page-
yellow
what page are you
column.
on?
60.
Okay. I had a lot of fun making it.
In the published version of REPA 2, when the language was in there about the probationary and the professional licenses that resulted from evaluation results, that language in effect changed the teaching prerequisite for receiving an administrator's license from 2 years to 5 years, because it required that someone seeking a building administrator's license would have to have held the professional license for 5 years, which meant they would have had to have had a 5-year license before they could get a building administrator license. We're suggesting that we go back to the language that actually is in REPA 1, which is back to 2 years. We did not intend to increase the amount of teaching experience that was required before you could go into school administration. It was the operation of the different terminology of the licenses that went from 2 years to 5 years, and we didn't intend that. So we're now suggesting that we go back to the 2-year teaching experience prerequisite. Mr. Pettibone, did that make sense? You have a questioning look on your face.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
An additional increased option is the flexibility now for a superintendent's license. Rather than requiring an EDS, REPA 2 will require a master's degree and completion of an approved program. So you could have, it's more flexible in that you could have a master's degree that's not necessarily in administration, but that coupled with completion of an approved program would be sufficient in order to obtain a superintendent's license. Or it could be both. It could be a master's in administration, which would fulfill both of the 2 requirements.
We are also keeping the temporary pathway, right?
Yes. One more change. Speaking of the 2 years requirement, we have expanded the definition of creditable teaching experience to include teaching in higher ed, so that folks who have taught in the college environment could use that and obtain the building level license. So as we mentioned, we are increasing the areas that you can add through testing alone with the 4 exceptions that we listed earlier. We've also expanded P12 licenses. So you can get a license that covers all of the content areas, or for some areas you can limit that to a particular building model. Developmental, thank you. For the adjunct permit, the requirements, we're maintaining that in our recommendation. The requirements are outlined again because it is a new type of license. You have to have a bachelor's degree and a 3.0 in an area in which you would be teaching. You would have to pass the content area exam, and this would be renewable based on effectiveness data. So this would be the only license that would still have renewal based on effectiveness data. And it would be a 5-year license. And we just listed some resources on our last slide.
Do you have any questions, Michelle, or recent comments from the board?
I would like to make a point. You can confirm my understanding, but it's pretty clear to me. The legislature always has delegated this authority. The Professional Standards Board has been eliminated. We'll approve processes and criteria at the board level and then eventually vote to approve programs. The department will still obviously have a role and do some of the vetting based on the direction we give them. So we'll know what we're after. There's not a taking our professional folks at the department, we're not really eliminating their involvement in the process. We're just making sure that on such a critical piece, frankly, that was illuminated in some of this discussion, many emails and today and through the public hearing, if you read the testimony, people want excellent folks in front of our children to teach them, and we're taking ultimate responsibility for the process criteria and then the approval. So it's really not exactly either or thing, it's a joint thing, and we're tying the field to the higher ed, to the standards, to the board's authority and responsibility. Which actually we've seen some interesting literature. I just read a nice article about it last night, courtesy of one of our board members. But it's the description of eliminating the department from the process is really not the issue here.
No, and if I used the word eliminate, I certainly didn't mean to.
No, I think I heard it. Oh. I heard it was alluded to at least in some of the discussion. I just wanted to clarify where we're at because that's a little better description of what we're doing here. We're just making sure as a board that we have ultimate responsibility for this. Sure. Criteria, process, and then ultimate approval.
Let me ask the same question I did previously about clarification. Can you clarify a little bit and walk me through your thinking about the adjunct license? That's obviously the area that I would say got the overwhelming amount of attention today, and certainly got a lot of comments in the hearing. What's your comment about your thoughts about the need for that, and why you decided not to include any kind of pedagogical requirement in making that recommendation?
Well, I do think that using the effectiveness data is designed to achieve a kind of pedagogical requirement, because the effectiveness data will be based on evaluation, where we do look at, it's local control on exactly what their evaluation model looks like, but that would indicate what they're teaching in the classroom is.
But it's kind of ex post facto, isn't it? I mean, it's after they've done it.
Yes, it is. I think that my understanding is we wanted to have an additional avenue for flexibility. This would be kind of an alternative to transition to teaching, where those folks actually enter a classroom before receiving much in the way of pedagogy, but they receive it at the same time. And it's always local control. If a teacher doesn't seem to be doing well, then the administrators in that district would always have the opportunity to remove that person from the classroom.
It's a bit, depends on the situation, Administrator Neal. You could have a bit of a residency. You think of the medical field where you have some education area. It depends how closely it's guided at the school level, and the university that's involved. A lot of times you'll take a talent where it's worth, sometimes on hires in any field, you'll say, well, they don't have everything, but they might have so much potential. You'd like to go through a guided internship or practicum to get them there. And I suspect will we build a monitor success of where this is tried with the adjunct process, and if we see a lot of variation in quality, do something about it? I mean, will we be able to monitor that, in your opinion, to see what the success rates, failures, ups, downs, informal or formal?
I mean, I think that if the board requested, that would be some collaboration between the board and the department. There's certainly data points that you could ascertain and evaluate to determine how those folks are doing in the classroom. And this is a rule under your authority, so you could always revise the adjunct permit if you chose to no longer have it.
To clarify again, I should have asked this sooner, but you can't get an adjunct license for elementary, correct? Because of the fact that we're not exempting that from the test only. So you only can get an adjunct license for teaching middle school or high school. Am I correct on that?
Well, in order to get an adjunct permit, you must have an undergraduate major in a content area.
Right.
Individuals who would come out with an undergraduate, a major in elementary ed, will have been through a teacher ed program.
Okay, so
but if they have a secondary content area, most of those adjunct permits, or all of them, will be issued for secondary level content areas, just because of the way the requirements are structured.
And I think once you get into middle and high school, you're teaching a departmentalized subject. If you have a degree in biology, you're going to be teaching biology, whereas in elementary you may be teaching English and biology and spelling, and I think that's the major difference.
I'd like to hear other board member comment. I'm inclined to want to. I understand. I'm very supportive of the idea of an alternative avenue for teaching. I'd like to see some kind of I don't know if the word is requirement, but some kind of connection to ensuring that someone is either mentored by an expert teacher in that district when they're hired for some period